Hey readers, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Paloma, and today's video is going to be my review of The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. So let's get started. So I've talked about Lauren Groff's work on this channel before. I'm a really big fan of The Matrix, which was a book she published a couple years ago before she came out with The Vaster Wilds. Arguably, that's one of my favorite books of the modern era. I think she's a really fantastic writer. I think she has a unique style of writing, and a lot of her books are actually quite different to what I thought it would be. The plot will tell you exactly what the book is about, but it's really the depth of the character that she goes into, as well as the setting around her, that's really what makes the book so unique, and what I really love about her as an author, and something that I would like to emulate if I was to ever publish my own book. So The Vaster Wilds is at once a thrilling adventure story and a penetrating fable about trying to find a new way of living in a world succumbing to the churn of colonialism. A work of raw and prophetic power, it tells the story of America in miniature through one girl at a hinge point in history to ask how and if we can adapt quickly enough to save ourselves. Because I loved The Matrix so much, I might have put like a little bit of pressure on this book to be just as good. In many ways, it's just as good as The Matrix. I think the character is very compelling. She has no name for the majority of the book, other than the names that other people have given her. And even throughout her journey of self throughout the book, she really doesn't give herself a new name or a new identity. And I think that's just as powerful as if she were to name herself, based on the journey that she goes through as she's stumbling through, pre-colonial America. Like the back of the book says, she does journey through pre-colonial America, so there's not that many settlements for her to join up to as she's escaping the colonial settlement that she runs from. And as she's going through this, she's realizing that she knows next to nothing, because from where she came from, which I had to assume which was England, she's used to a certain way of life, which is city living. Even though she was poor and she was a servant girl, she still understands how to live in a city versus how to live in the wilderness. And so as she's going through this, she's learning, which berries are poisonous, which are not, and, the best way to get water. What really made the book so compelling is that Lauren Groff kind of weaves the story of why she left the colonial settlement throughout the story. Throughout the novel, you kind of feel like, oh, maybe this is why she left, and then the girl is like, well, no, that's not really why I left, and we're still kind of wondering what happened, what caused her to leave, what was the issue. And towards the end of the book, it's finally explained, and you're like, oh my god, this was actually a really good way to kind of establish not only who she is as a character, but what she's been through and what was the main premise for why she escaped. Because it really takes a lot for a person to escape a colonial settlement, especially if they don't know anybody there. I would like to think historically, once they landed, even if things got rough, they never really left each other unless they had the proper amount of supplies or they knew somebody in another settlement. So for her to leave with next to nothing, it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage as well. So it was really interesting to kind of read, the little tidbits about the girl and what kind of caused her to leave, because it was more than just one thing. It kind of stacked up, and then the main boiling point came, and we're like, okay, I see why she left. One of the issues that I had with the book while she was journeying through the wilderness, and as someone who lives in the modern era and has never encountered the wilderness in any way, shape, or form, I did wish that she had kind of encountered another settlement. Throughout the book, she comes very close to being with other people, and eventually, as the plot goes, something happens and they just can't really reach that edge to communicate with her, either because she sees them first or because an incident happens that kind of stops the interaction from happening. And it's more or less I want to say the book is more of a character study of the girl itself, so it doesn't really make sense for her to interact with so many people, whereas her entire life has been interactions with people up until she decides to journey into the wilderness. But I do think that the plot could have been enhanced a little bit more if Lauren Groff had decided to take another direction with the book, whereas she comes to this other settlement and kind of realizes what it means to be not a servant girl. She does realize what it means to not be a servant girl throughout the book, but I think it would have added like a little extra edge if she was able to start over in another settlement and kind of really find herself rather than find herself through hypothermia and, you know, the wilderness itself. Once I realized it was a character study, I leaned into it a bit more, and I kind of realized where Lauren Groff was kind of going with the book and the storyline and the girl herself. I think she still did a really great job. I kind of learned a bit more about myself throughout the book because, like most of her other books, like Matrix, there's a religious element to it. Obviously, the servant girl only learns from the people above her, and if they bring a religious element into it, she's gonna follow. So a lot of the way she was speaking to herself, because she had nobody else to speak to, was very religious-like. She was speaking to a higher being that she couldn't even see and was like, answer me. And the God that she believes in obviously didn't speak back to her, but in her mind it did, but the voice was her own. So I guess that adds the little religious aspect to it. The end of the book, I think, was probably my favorite part. When she finally settles down into one specific part of the wilderness and she really realizes that she can make it on her own, I thought that was really great. Lauren Groff to me is a bit like Tolstoy. She does a really good death scene. The way her characters die in her books reminds me of the death of Ivan Ilyich, which I had read in college, and it's almost similar where the character kind of reflects on their life. Would they change anything about their life? What could they have done differently? You know, and that kind of thing. If you've read The Death of Ivan Ilyich, I think you'll kind of see that reflected within the last few chapters. And maybe even in The Matrix, because in The Matrix a couple characters die and they kind of have that same, you know, release of what it means to be themselves if they lived the life that they really wanted to and things like that. So I think she does a really good job at writing death scenes. I think it's her strong point, as well as writing really strong, nuanced female characters. I really will read anything Lauren Groff puts out, and I highly recommend it. It's very quick to read, but it's still really impactful. I think she has a really specific way of writing that kind of just encapsulates you and kind of makes you really think about not only yourself but the world around you, especially if you're a servant girl journeying into the wilderness for the first time with no help, barely any supplies, and only your wits and your belief in God to kind of help you. Overall, I give the book 4.5 stars. I think it's a really great read. I actually took it to the beach. I don't think this is the kind of book you take to the beach, but I was on a trip and I thought, why not? Let me just finish the book. And I really enjoyed it. I personally recommend it. And if you pick it up, please let me know, especially what you think about it, or if you've ever read any of her other works. I still have a few of her works that are on my TBR, which is like Fates and Furies in Florida. And I also want to visit her bookstore. She has a bookstore in Gainesville, I think. If I ever make that trip up there, I would love to see it. So that was my review of The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!